Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so we can get started here. Good evening. My name is James Schroll, and I am the chair of the Long Range Planning Committee of the Planning Commission. Welcome to the September 29th, 2020 meeting of the LRPC. For the safety of our LRPC members, county staff, and other stakeholders, we are holding a virtual meeting today. All participants with us are joining remotely. We are legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive orders, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the county board's continuity of operations ordinance adopted in March of this year. This is our second virtual meeting. I'd like to orient everyone to our virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how today's meeting will run. Today's meeting is available to join from the calendar invite, which includes the Microsoft Teams link. You can also access it from the LRPC page, the county's event calendar, and at the top of today's agenda. Additionally, there is a dial-in option for those who wish to use it. If anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, we would recommend that you rejoin us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For everyone joining us via Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will adjust that in a moment about when it's appropriate to turn it back on. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. The meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: for participants who need technical assistance and for the other attendees to pose brief clarifying questions to the larger audience. While these will be monitored, they will not be formally acknowledged. Staff or the applicant may, however, decide to address these comments as appropriate. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion or any inappropriate statements. Those who are planning to provide public comment will still have an opportunity to do so at the end of this meeting, as the chat will not serve that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the public record during the assigned public testimony periods. Well, we definitely hope to be done by 9 p.m. this evening. There's a debate that I think many people would like to go watch, so it's my intention to try to close by 9 p.m. But if there's a sense that we would go over, we might have a little flexibility there to make sure we capture, public comment and address next steps. If LRPC members wish to be recognized to speak on an item, please turn on your video feed and leave your microphone muted. I will use video feeds as an indicator of who wishes to speak. You may also raise your hand if you have that option in front of you. Once you've been recognized, you may unmute yourself. Once you've completed your remarks, please turn off your video feed. Do we have any commissioners joining us by phone today? Okay, doesn't sound like it. For folks who are joining us who are not on the LRPC, I'm going to reserve about 15 minutes at the end of the meeting for public comment. At that, if you wish to speak, please kind of type into the chat feature, that you wish to be, we wish to make public comment remarks. You'll be called on to speak at the end of the meeting again, and you will be muted up until that time. So please unmute yourself when you're called on, and then at the conclusion of your remarks, please mute yourself again. Lastly, this is a public forum, and today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. So today's meeting, we have 2 items on the agenda. The first is the green building policy update. So the first half of the 2 hours will be dedicated to that. We will have a staff presentation and then LRPC discussion. The next item is the Crystal City Substation GLUP Amendment. Again, a staff presentation followed by LRPC discussion. Public comment will follow both of these items. So if you wish to speak on either of these, public comment will be taken around 8:45. With let me just see if Nick has anything or not Nick, sorry. Tim has anything he wants to add before I pass it over to Joan and Jessica. Oh, actually, we need to do introductions. I'm sorry. Let's go around and do introductions. We'll do starting with the Planning Commission. Again, my name is James Schroll, and I am the LRPC chair. Elizabeth Guerin.
I'm Elizabeth Guerin. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Jane Siegel.
Hi, I'm Jane Siegel, member of the Planning Commission.
Great, thanks, Jane. Jim Lantelme.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jim Lantelme, and I'm vice chair of the Planning Commission.
Great. Nia Bagley.
Good evening. I'm Nia Bagley, and I am a Planning Commission member.
Great. Then we'll go through staff. Jennifer Scow. Apologies on the mispronunciation.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Scow. I'm the strategic project planner at CPHD.
Great. Jennifer Smith.
Hi, good evening. Jennifer Smith, planning manager for comprehensive planning.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jessica Aberland.
Hi, everyone. It's Jessica Aberland on the Green Building team for Arlington County.
Thanks. Joan Kelsch.
Hi, good evening. I'm Joan Kelsch, also on the Green Building team in the Office of Sustainability with Jessica.
Kelly Brown. Kelly Brown.
James, she may have stepped away, so why don't we just continue with the introductions?
Sure. Yep. Matt Matusik.
Good evening, everybody. Matt Matusik with Arlington County Planning Division.
Matt Ladd.
Matt Ladd with the Comprehensive Planning Team.
Thanks, Matt. Tim Murphy.
Good evening, everybody. Tim Murphy. I'm with the Arlington's Planning Division and the LRPC staff coordinator.
Great. So thanks everybody for your introductions. I know we're joined by several other folks this evening. When you make any public comments, please introduce yourself at that time so we can try to stay on time this evening. Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add before I pass it off to Joan and Jessica?
The only thing I would add, if you are interested in making a public comment on one of the 2 items, as James mentioned, please enter your name into the chat and please indicate which of the 2 items you would like to speak to.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Okay, so I'd like to pass it off to Joan and Jessica for their presentation, and I would like to, have everybody hold questions before until the end of their presentation. So over to you.
Great. Thank you, James. I'm Joan. Jessica's the other live one on your screen. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it, please. I think this is it. Can you see that?
Yep, looks good.
Yes.
Do you want to do full screen?
Yep,
Right.
got it.
Looks good.
Okay, so we are here to talk about the green building incentive policy. It's time for an update. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. There we go. The green building policy is for site plan development, and the purpose of it is to encourage buildings to be built that use less energy and have overall reduced environmental impact. It's important to note that the program is voluntary, so site plan developers can participate if they want to and it fits the project. But in recent years, nearly all site plan projects have participated. This program costs the county nothing. In fact, it makes the county a little bit more money because it brings in a little bit more tax revenue from a slightly larger building. And it doesn't cost the developers any more than they're willing to spend because they invest in the slightly larger building with a focus on energy efficiency and environmental issues, but they get additional revenue from leasing that small amount of additional space for the life of the building. Every time we go through this, it's really important that we get consensus on the project. Negotiation is really critical. We need to find that sweet spot where we're getting enough environmental benefit for the county's purposes, and the developers are incentivized just enough to participate. If it's too difficult and they don't participate, then we just get a bunch of buildings that are built to building code. If we get that fine line just right, we end up getting buildings that are significantly more energy efficient and sit more lightly on the land, which is the ultimate goal. So very quickly, this program has been in place since the year 2000, so it's 20 years old. We've updated it several times. We have to update it because the building code improves, because technology improves, because the market in DC gets better. We all learn new things, and frankly, the planetary imperative is also becoming more urgent. So the last couple updates have focused significantly on energy efficiency, and this one is no different. There's a real emphasis on energy performance, on renewable energy, focused on zero carbon and net zero energy buildings, with a few other couple things thrown in that we will certainly talk about. The plan, this policy is in line with our community energy plan, which was adopted last year. I know you all know about that. The ultimate goal of that is to become carbon neutral by 2050, and we need to start right now in order to do that. Buildings are a significant part of Arlington's carbon footprint, and so to significantly reduce energy use in those buildings is our collective challenge. We can't go from where we are today to net zero tomorrow. It's an iterative process, but this is one of those steps that's going to get us closer to that net zero carbon goal. So the policy as it stands right now, this will look somewhat familiar to some of you, I would imagine. Site plans that participate we use the LEED green building rating system as a baseline, and each additional level of density as measured with FAR has an increasing level of LEED. And then we also ask for this handful of other things, mostly energy focused, that buildings are supposed to comply with in order to get the density in addition. So Energy Star appliances, WaterSense fixtures, there's a performance standard that's measured by Energy Star, which means the buildings are actually performing the way they're designed. We've asked for some energy reporting. We really encourage significant energy efficiency incorporated into the project. So that's where we are right now. I'm going to hand it over to Jessica to talk about what we're thinking about for an update for the next round. So Jessica, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Joan. So I'm going to review the proposed changes. It should take about 10 minutes to go through this so we can orient everyone and get to a shared understanding of what it is that we're proposing. And then we can use the remainder of the time to dive into your detailed questions and comments. So this slide shows the basic structure of the program with the proposed changes. There are baseline items that each project would have to commit to in order to earn the specified amount of bonus density. And I'll go through some of those baseline items in more detail in the next slide. At the higher levels of bonus density, we're proposing to offer a number of extra items that the developer would have to choose from, and that's in addition to an increasing energy performance score. So for the 0.35 level, they would choose 3 items from that extra list, and for the 0.50 level, they would choose 4 items from that list, plus a couple other prerequisites at that level. And I'll go through the extra list options in an upcoming slide as well. And then for zero carbon or net zero energy certification, we propose a 0.60 FAR bonus as the initial suggestion. So in this policy update, we're aiming for sustainability criteria that has enough rigor that is going to lead new development closer to our community energy plan goals, but not too difficult that it would dissuade participation. So every time we update the green building incentive policy, it's sort of this optimization exercise of what is technically possible and what's financially achievable given the value of that incentive that we're offering. And as Joan said, this is a voluntary program. So this is just the beginning of a stakeholder engagement process. We're sort of like right in the middle of it. And that includes building developers, the public, commissions. And so what's in this table, what's in the rest of the presentation will likely change as a result of all of this engagement in response to developer feedback, to your feedback and other feedback. Next slide. So here is the overview of baseline items, and these are currently in our policy, but we're proposing some adjustments to them. So that would include the gold level certification of the building's design and construction using LEED or Earthcraft. We do want every project to use the updated version, LEED version 4 energy credit at a minimum, which has a more rigorous baseline than the current LEED version. We still have Energy Star and WaterSense labels for appliances and plumbing fixtures and are adding clothes dryers to that list, which is a new option that's on the market. For energy performance post-occupancy, Energy Star building certification would be a required commitment, and that's based on actual performance and demonstrated through energy utility bills and data after the building's been constructed. So currently, post-occupancy Energy Star certification is only required for office. And so what we're proposing is that this is required for any eligible building type, including multifamily and hotel. Currently, 10 years of energy reporting, also called benchmarking, is a required part of the program, and we're proposing that remain, but that the energy data would automatically be recorded and accessible for remote download. We are also proposing to shift the financial security to ensure that's used to ensure the certifications to be split 50-50 between the initial green building certification and the post-occupancy Energy Star certification. And so those were all of the prerequisites that are already in the program, but with some proposed adjustments. Next slide. And these items are new proposed prerequisites. Those include earning at least 3 energy optimization points under the updated version of LEED, which references ASHRAE 90.1 2016. ASHRAE 90.1 2016 is roughly a 10% improvement over the current LEED baseline, which is ASHRAE 90.1 2010. And in addition, every development would have to set an energy use intensity design target. It would have all LED lights and also proposing continuous exterior insulation. Also new is installing a wall mock-up at the job site with instructions in English and in Spanish to ensure that the subcontractors that are putting the wall together understand the wall's components and order of assembly. We're also proposing that each new development track refrigerant leakage and are proposing that the development test the central ventilation ductwork for leakage to ensure that the apartments or office spaces that are at the end of those ventilation duct runs are getting adequate fresh air. We're proposing the installation of electric vehicle charging stations as a prerequisite and a relatively small amount of on-site solar. And then for the non-energy related sustainability prerequisites, we would have a biophilia narrative and bird-friendly glass, And Joan will talk about that in a little bit more detail later. No uplighting to reduce light pollution, and finally proposing equity criteria, which I'll review in an upcoming slide in more detail. Next slide. So what I just went through were all the proposed baseline items, which would be the minimum requirement for program participation. And now I'll go through in a little more detail the extra options that would earn the developer higher levels of bonus density. So as I mentioned earlier, as proposed, the developer would select at least 3 of these items to earn 0.35 FAR and 4 to earn 0.50 FAR. So most of these are energy saving measures, including 3 additional energy optimization points as part of the LEED certification, so 6 total. Whole building air leakage testing or envelope commissioning to make sure that that building enclosure is really sound and tight. Advanced energy metering, building life cycle impact reduction, in other words, using and reusing an existing building or building materials. And grid harmonization. Grid harmonization, an example of that is installing controls or a backup generation, maybe battery system, so that once the building is in operation, the building manager can maybe ramp down equipment or change the timing of when equipment starts up so that the building is using less energy when there's peak demand on the grid. And when there's peak demand on the grid, it's also the dirtiest power plants are powering up to supply that energy. So we want to load shift away from peak demand whenever possible. We also have on here installing additional solar on the list of options. And a new option that we more recently added as we're learning more about how to make buildings all electric, is adding electric hot water heating as an extra list option. And that would be non-electric resistance options like a ground source heat pump, otherwise known as geothermal, or other heat pump. And the same for ventilation, a electric version, but not electric resistance, so a ground source heat pump. And that is to eliminate the combustion of on-site natural gas. And then finally, we have on this list the LEED version 4.1 credit for affordable housing, which is a little bit more, calls for more units than Arlington's housing program. So it's sort of additive to that program. And we've gone through that with our other housing staff here at the county, and they are supportive of that, as it would just add more affordable housing to Arlington's housing stock. And we invite suggestions for additional options to this list. We're aiming for them to all be relatively equal in difficulty. So NAIOP, our local developer group, for example, suggested on-site battery storage as an additional option. So we're looking into that. Next slide. Here's the proposed equity criteria, and this would be a baseline measure. So all projects would have to do this. And the overall aim is to increase diversity in the design and construction industry. So this isn't about the specific demographics of the design and construction team of a project. Rather, it requires that at least one firm on that team has a racial and ethnic diversity, equity, and inclusion program as part of its operations. So at least one member of that team works for a firm that has things like trainings and policies that foster an inclusive environment and promote diversity. So with that, I'll hand it over to Joan, who's going to talk about a couple other prerequisites and process.
Great, thank you, Jessica. We have been talking with several people in the community about this concept of biophilia, which is integrating nature and humans as they relate to the building and the site it's on and the area that it's built in, the neighborhood that it's built in. We would like to ask the idea is to ask developers to provide a narrative, just a description of how they're going to address some of these issues. Some of them are relate to the design of the building and how it incorporates nature both indoors and outdoors. We want them to talk about how the building relates to the environment on the site as well as adjacent sites. Presumably they don't just talk about it, but they actually address these issues. We will provide some guidelines and they would do that ahead of time. Considering views from the building and to the building, how that appears, how that might incorporate nature and some softening of the urban environment. Access to the sky, access to water in the area, be it views of the river or an on-site stream or something along those lines. Obviously using native plants of all sizes, gardens, shrubs, trees, etc. Enhancing the tree canopy is critical. Heat island mitigation, that's another good one to just cool down the area that the building is in, providing shade and planted areas to address that issue. We just want to begin to understand how the building is interacting with nature around it, on the site and off the site, and have that described in a detailed way. The second thing we're toying with is this idea of bird-friendly glass. It's been an option on our program so far. It has been done in the region. It's not particularly complicated. This is how this involves putting glass on the building so that birds don't fly into it and die, frankly, bird strikes, eliminating bird strikes or minimizing them. There are a couple options we're considering for compliance. One is a prescriptive one, which would say you'd have to include bird-friendly glass in all of the glassed areas up to 36 feet. The other one is more a performance-based, where you take into consideration all the components of the facade, calculate kind of a weighted average of all of those. It's outlined in a LEED credit, so they would have to meet that LEED credit standard. We do need to make sure that this bird-friendly glass criteria meets other county goals. So the county wants sidewalk areas to be friendly and safe for pedestrians, have transparency into the ground floor retail, or so you can see in and out of restaurants on the floor. So we don't want to block views in and out of the building, but that's all can totally be done using this kind of bird-friendly glass or other building treatments. The other thing that we're toying with, we're just throwing it out there for comment, is this idea of an automatic update. So every time we update this policy, it takes 6-9 months, if not more, and a lot of work, and we can kind of predict where this is going to be going in the future. So we are proposing that in 2.5 years after the board adopts approves the policy, that we would automatically have a couple updates. One of them would be to enhance energy efficiency using the LEED credit, add 2 extra points to that. One is to focus a little bit more on electrification. So we have some electrification with heat pumps and that kind of thing, but this would address other electrification of building systems. And then just the 10% improvement over your design target so that the building is designed to be 10% more energy efficient. Those would kick in automatically on a given date after the policy is adopted. And then finally, the community engagement process. So we're right in the middle of all of this, as Jessica mentioned before. We've been going to all sorts of commissions, LRPC being one of many. We've been working with NAIOP and the development community. We've met with the Chamber. We've met with the Economic Development Commission, all sorts of other folks to try to collect comments in person in meetings. We also have set up a website, interactive website, and I know a couple of you have provided comments on that website already. I hope you have the link. If you do not, we can certainly provide it to you. But that's a place where you can listen to basically this presentation again, and then make comments right on the slides if you have questions or things that you'd like to add. We are hoping to go to the board with this in December, so we need to be done with the public comment process middle to late October. October 10th is the last day for public comment, and then we have to do all of the board report drafting and vetting through the county manager and all of that through the months of November. So that's basically where we are, offering several opportunities for input. We're continuing to meet with stakeholders, and we'll be drafting the policy from there. Here is our contact information. If you want to contact us directly, you're more than welcome to do that. We are happy to receive comments on the website, and we can take questions now.
All right. Thank you, Jessica and Joan, for your presentation. We're glad you're here on this topic, and something is of interest to many of us over the years, so do appreciate you both being with us this evening. So now I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues to see if they have any questions. I certainly do, but I'll reserve those to later and see if my colleagues have questions. So please either turn your video on or raise your virtual hand if you'd like to ask a question or make
James,
a comment.
do you want me to leave this slideshow up, or do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
I think it's good to have the slideshow up, and then we can
Great.
have you kind of go back to anything as a reference.
Absolutely.
But thanks for asking. All right, I don't see any. All right, Jim.
Hi. Yeah, I have a question actually about bird-friendly glass. This is a topic that we raise, I believe, at every site plan, for every site plan that comes before us. And I think we've been pretty successful in getting it in place. Do we actually need to give additional density for bird-friendly glass? Because I think we're getting them in most, if not all, of the buildings, of the developments that we've been recommending to the board.
So this would just be one of many things they would have to do. I think it's recommended now, it's not required now. And so we would just make it something that every site plan that's participating in the program would have to do. It doesn't have a certain density assigned to it. It's just one of that long list of things they have to do.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right. Others? Elizabeth Guerin.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation, Joan and Jessica. I really appreciate the respect for coordinating with the other policy goals. That is something that we face at SPRC too. How does this work with other things that developers are being asked? And also, I like the idea of the automatic update. It lets us all know what to expect. Can you give us a sense of what the discussion was like with NAIOP and the development community? Are they generally supportive of these changes going forward and happy to comply so long as they know what's coming? Are there particular areas where there's a lot of pushback? We sometimes hear at SPRC, for example, with electric vehicle charging stations, that's a very expensive initial outlay that's likely to be changed over time and requires, some accommodation with other designs. So can you give us a sense of what you did here in your outreach with them?
Sure. Jessica, do you want to do that? You want me to do that?
Maybe we can collectively do it.
Great. Have at it.
So one of the issues I know that they brought up early was solar. Because there are a lot of, I suppose, competing, I guess, desires for how to use that roof space. So that was one issue, and we're working through kind of some, different compliance paths so that it's flexible. Again, it's a prerequisite, and so we want to make sure those prerequisites, if they can be flexible and get to what we want them to get to, then they will. They are concerned about the automatic update, particularly pertaining to electrification. And that's something that we are still looking at. Also, there are actually, for certain building types, some technological barriers to going to building all electric buildings. Those are the two that are coming to mind. Joan, do you have others that you can remember from their comments?
I think they are remarkably supportive. I think the developers like this program. It offers them a little bit of extra density and a higher quality building all at the same time. The community likes it, or we like it at least, because it reduces environmental impact to the county. They always push back a little bit on the energy efficiency. We're not surprised by that, but we always find a happy medium somewhere in the middle where they can achieve it. They have to stretch, but they can achieve it, and we're getting more than what we would get if we got a code-built building, significantly more than we would get on a code-built building. Those conversations always go, they're always very cordial and collaborative. There hasn't been any major pushback this time.
Yeah, I will say they want to be included. You know, we're going to have to write site plan conditions that turn these bullet points into actual site plan conditions, and so they want to be involved in reviewing that, and that's really important. We don't want to write conditions that, you know, we need them to kind of cover our blind spots. And then another issue I remember coming up was Energy Star post-occupancy certification, particularly for mixed-use buildings. Energy Star just is lacking a little bit in how they approach mixed-use buildings. So, say an apartment building with a grocery store at the bottom, Energy Star doesn't give any extra allowance for the energy intensity of that grocery store. And so that, you know, we also flag that as an issue because we need grocery stores and we don't want, you know, a really difficult energy target to keep that from happening. So what we're doing is working with them on an alternative compliance path that kind of mirrors Energy Star, but would allow some more flexibility.
Thank you. James, may I have another moment? James?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, thanks. This is really helpful because sometimes we don't have the context for the discussions that you're having, and we only have a limited amount of time to go into some of this at the SPRCs. So I guess I'd like to say we would probably love to see these site plan conditions in advance of seeing them as part of an approved project, just so that we know what they look like and we don't have to spend a lot of time familiarizing ourselves with them right on the dais when we get them at a hearing, if that's possible. I guess the other reason I really like this automatic update is there is a sense from members of the SPRC and then from some of the other commissions that participate that we need to create a path forward to get a lot closer to the CEP goals. And to me, it seems like knowing that we have these updates, we can almost say, you know, the next update we will address this, and the next update we will be able to get further at this. It doesn't just leave it out there in the ether that we're getting closer, but how close? And speak of the devil, here's going to be John Bloom, but I did want to know, what did E2C2 say about this?
Did John Bloom show up? He should respond to that question.
Oh man, E2C2 was our first presentation, and we've had maybe 10 or 12 presentations since then. I'm trying to think what
I think E2C2 would like to see.
Oh, electric vehicles was a big one. So, and actually, what we're one of the topics of discussion was having EV ready buildings. So rather than, you know, right now we're proposing 2% of the parking spaces have electric vehicle charging stations. So they suggested more as the baseline, and then also consider how to weave in a building that maybe has capacity to do 50%. Maybe doesn't have 50% of the parking spaces with charging right now, but has, for example, a big enough electric transformer to handle that capacity. So that is a complicated thing to look into based on kind of when it's anticipated different building types would be using and charging their energy. But we're looking into that and the cost and considering that potentially for an extra item, depending on, it could be quite expensive. And so we're considering that. That's one I remember. Joan, do you remember other?
I think E2C2 is looking for as much energy efficiency as we can squeeze out of this program. They're big on electrification as much as possible, and obviously they've got they're big interest in solar and renewables as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. I wanted to just quickly go back to the slide that you have up there. I would lean toward, and I gather you're still thinking about it, getting some data on it, a performance measure rather than a prescriptive measure. We recently had a SPRC on the Ames Center, and I believe David Howell, who's an expert in biophilic treatment, said that I think he felt 5 stories would be more appropriate to have the glass at that level up. 5 stories, 36 feet would be a reasonably tall tree, but some of the canopy trees are taller than that, and the birds tend to go to the trees, and they're then in danger if the glass is not bird friendly. Then there's also the flyways for a lot of our buildings along the Potomac River are really right in the flyway. So some kind of performance measure, carefully designed, I guess, would be my preference. And then we can still push at SPRC as we always do for bird-friendly treatment. A related question that I have is, I don't know the LEED scoring intimately, but does it work like this, sort of in a nutshell, that when you look to certify at a certain level, silver, gold, platinum, you have a choice at that point of which treatments you want, which things you want to do. When your Arlington scheme says, okay, you're at LEED gold, if you if you want the 0.35, I think is the first, or no, 0.25 or 0.35, if you want that much extra density, then you have to pick additional LEED points out of this. Is that how that works?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's not just LEED points, but other things that we've specified.
Oh, okay, but some of the options are additional LEED points. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. But then there are the Arlington Energy performance credits. And I just would make one final comment that I think this sort of incremental approach has worked with the market, so that what's interesting is that you incentivize to the extent that you can. There's sort of a limit. It's like a tunnel. You incentivize to get people more interested in environmental technologies effectively, or energy that facilitate energy efficiency or other environmental benefits. And then that the market absorbs that, and the market is moving in that direction anyway. And that and then once the market rises to that level of environmental care, whatever that level is, then we jump ahead again of the market and continue to sort of drag it upward. It seems to me that it's been working. Now, I think the criticism is it's right now we feel it's not working fast enough, but I just commend you for getting rid of LEED silver as a way of getting 2.5, because that's come up many times at our SPRC.
Mm-hmm.
It may not end up there, but I just wanted to commend you for taking that leap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. And I would concur with her remarks that we've heard over and over again the desire to kind of move beyond silver. So would commend staff for doing that. Commissioner Lantelmi, you seem to have your hand up. Do you have an additional question? Oh, thank you, Commissioner. I have a few questions here. If Commissioner Lantelmi, do you have another question? No. Okay.
No, I don't. Yeah, the hand had never come down. I'm sorry.
All right, no worries. So, yeah, thank you again for your presentation. That was great. I like the direction generally you're going in, so commend staff for that. I do have some questions. So, on the 2% EV charging, wondering sort of how staff arrived at that number for the EVSE.
Yeah, that is the lead credit. So we would just say, as much as possible, we do try to use a third-party rating system and rely on that just for kind of simplicity of the program. And so 2% is what earns you a lead point.
Okay, thank you. And then does LEED have any kind of lead points for EV capable, EV ready?
Yeah, there is as part of that same credit, EV ready for 6% of parking spaces is in there. One strange thing though about it is that you can't actually earn a point in a commercial office building for both of those things, the charging and the EV ready. I don't really know why. However, if you're a multifamily building, you can earn the 2 points. Yeah, we're considering how to deal with that sort of annoyance.
This may be a place where staff looks at doing something outside of LEED. 2% is pretty low in terms of kind of, the, EVSE spaces. You probably would be in the neighborhood of at least 5% for the spaces. And then, I mean, pretty soon we at least need to have the building have the capacity to install future spaces. And so, I mean, the cost of doing it later is pretty significant. And so, it can be 6 times as expensive, something like that. So, and we're nearing the point where, EVs are going to reach cost parity with internal combustion engine vehicles. We're getting really close to that. At which point, we're going to need to have that. Also, if we don't have our vehicles really transition aggressively to electric within the next 10 to 15 years, there's no way we're going to reach our goals, our goals. So I'd encourage you on that front. Okay. Question on, you mentioned that there's electrification, you're pushing for electrification of buildings, and that's great, the kind of electric heat pumps, totally supportive of that. I noticed that you aren't pushing for the electrification of cooking. I was wondering if staff could speak to why you're not doing that.
Yeah, cooking is probably the smallest energy load. So it won't have a huge impact. And it is one of the things that the developers have pushed back on, and just realizing that there is a certain desire for tenants to have gas cooking, and also in the restaurant space, there aren't a lot of actors using like induction cooking or other electric options at this point. And so we're not saying that we're not going to get there at some point, but that's not where we're going to focus first. We want to focus first on the big energy uses, heating, air conditioning, ventilation, domestic hot water.
Okay, appreciate the explanation, and I can understand the reticence by the development community on that. I guess the counter argument to that is that if it's a small kind of component to the energy use of a building, it could be also a quick win. I know that there would be reticence by development community on that, and I can understand that point of view. that tenants may not want that. Ultimately, though, kind of there needs to be in the long run, there should be a path to everything sort of can be electric, so then we can use renewables to power it, right? And so, if I understand that maybe you're not pushing for that at this time, I see that you're maybe not pushing for it in the next 2.5 year update. So like, that's a little frustrating, right? 2022, you were 2023, you're not gonna be pushing for that. So some of these small things do add up over time. So if we're not pushing for several of them, then that can be a bigger issue. Wondering about the on-site solar. So you have the 2 watts per square foot. Wondering how you arrived at that. You did mention that there was competition for things on the rooftop, which, rooftop appurtenances. So was that governing that, or how did you arrive at kind of the 2 watts per square foot?
Yeah, we wanted it to be something that, because it's prerequisite, that it could be integrated on any roof. And so if you look at kind of the size of solar panels and the output, it takes up about 16% of the roof area. And so thinking about, vegetated roof, space for vegetated roof, space for, common area for people to be outside and have outdoor space, mechanical equipment. We thought any building, could configure to squeeze that onto their building. And it wouldn't, prevent somebody from participating in the program overall, since it would be a prerequisite.
Okay. And did you consider any type of, given the floor plate of our buildings, did you consider any type of paying into any type of fund for, the government offset, or, the government investing in larger purchases elsewhere? Did you kind of consider any of those types of things where we could maybe have bigger bang for a buck?
Yeah, we're considering that. That'll take some, we have to work that within our own internal, bureaucracy, because it would be managing some funds. But yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for answering my questions. Let me just turn back to my colleagues to see if there are other questions, comments. Commissioner Siegel.
Yes, I did have a question, and I hope I can frame it clearly. When we had the SPRC for the Ames Center, and we talked at that time about sustainability and energy efficiency, there was a comment made that may have to do with the NZE or the ZC, the net zero energy or zero carbon categories. I'm not sure, but somebody mentioned that Joan and Jennifer, your staff, were doing a sort of a larger study of this. And if you are, I guess my 2 questions are, can you just elaborate that a little bit? And also, I'm glad to see zero carbon and net zero energy in the chart, and was just wondering what was the reaction of NIAP members to that.
I think what the Ames Center was probably talking about was our electrification study. So one of the requirements for zero carbon is that you have an all electric building. And so we have a third-party consultant that is looking at different building types, office, multifamily, hotel, and the usage, what they're doing with systems that are currently electric, which are not electric right now, and then providing us with an evaluation of electric heat pump systems that could replace anything that's natural gas in a building right now. And so I think that's probably what they're talking about, because that is the big sticking point. We did see a first version of that report, and it is looking like there are not good options for domestic hot water, which is why we have it as an extra item, as something you can get extra bonus density for, because we want to incentivize the market to look for a solution to that problem.
Good.
And then your second question was about
the developers. Yeah, I just wondered what their reaction was to that 0.60.
I think they're going to propose that it be higher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But did anyone did anyone look seriously at that from amongst that group?
The feedback that we got is that they were happy that we picked a number. In the existing policy, it's negotiable, and we have, tell us what the cost impact for you, so we can decide what an appropriate bonus amount is. And that just wasn't working for them. They have a spreadsheet. They want to put a number into a spreadsheet to figure out, how much it costs and is it worth it. So that was their feedback.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Any other kind of questions or comments from my colleagues? If not, the only other one I had, I guess, was, yeah, I do think it's good generally that you're considering doing updates every kind of 2.5 years. I guess the only devil's advocate position is that, well, let me stop before I say that. With those kind of automatic updates, is the intention that it wouldn't come back to commissions like E2C2 and NAIOP and Planning Commission and other stakeholders?
I think that's the idea, that we would set whatever the 2.5-year update would be, and that would automatically happen. That does not preclude doing another review of it and having, if in 2.5 years those updates don't look appropriate, we can always redo it. But we'd love to have the option to not go through this process every 2.5 or 3 years. The policy will need to be updated again, whether it's in 2.5, 4, 5 years, whatever that is. But those automatic updates would just roll over, and we wouldn't do public engagement on them again. They would be adopted by the board, so it's not something that's negotiable.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm of two minds at this. I understand your desire and staff's desire to be efficient and not and move forward. And I know this has been on kind of a longer time horizon over the course of time, given the climate crises that we all face. I do think that, some level of scrutiny and public feedback and on some of these things is warranted. So I think we need to strike that right balance. Nobody likes unnecessary meetings, not even planning commissioners. And so we understand that. But there's some of these things that if we're still, pushing on EV charging in 4 years' time, and it's kind of just kicking down the road, and we're not actually having that conversation, or we're still having a conversation about beneficial electrification in 2 years or 4 years, I think that's a reason to have some daylight and have a conversation.
I think the point of it was to just ensure that updates would happen at a specified interval. There will be other things that need to be addressed, and perhaps we start that process, but we don't have to renegotiate those. That the automatic we will move forward automatically and make progress towards our CEP goals. We can always do another update to the policy, and it will require that. That's going to be needed. There's no question. It's just having that automatic change. People know what to expect. They know what's coming. It's an easy way to move things forward, and then we can do some of the complicated thinking separate from that.
That sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I do agree that having the increase in EUI on that cycle is good and beneficial, given that our building stock is really responsible for a significant portion of our energy usage in the county. Okay, well, appreciate that. Are there any other questions, comments from my colleagues? I don't see any. Joan, Jessica, other pieces of feedback that you wished to get out of this evening? Did you kind of get some of the feedback that you were intending? Do you have any questions for us that maybe we didn't touch on?
I don't have anything else. We welcome your feedback on the website. Did you all get that link?
We did.
You did.
Yes. Giselle Johnson, our clerk, did pass it around to us, and I saw that Commissioner Siegel made some comments in there. I made some comments today. So thank you, Commissioner Siegel, for that. I encourage my other colleagues, if you haven't had a chance. I know there were some technical glitches a few weeks ago, and but it is good information. So if you have additional comments you'd like to make, we'd encourage you to make them in there. It's pretty nifty. You can go and kind of like in marking up a PDF, you can kind of go make comments in there.
Yeah, so we welcome that. And if you have other questions that need discussion, just let us know. We're happy to chat with you.
Great. Well, thank you, Joan and Jessica. Appreciate your time this evening. And thanks again. And we'll pass along any additional feedback we have.
Great. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, take care.
Okay.
All right. So our second item this evening is on the GLUP amendment, or potential GLUP amendment for the Crystal City substation. So I'd like to pass it over to Matt Ladd for his presentation. Matt.
Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. I am sharing my screen here, assuming everyone can see that.
Yes.
This is, thank you. So this is an item that we're bringing to LRPC tonight that's related to the GLUP public facility map, which is the newest aspect of our GLUP that you may recall was adopted as a part of the general land use plan, or GLUP reprint, in February of this year. And this is related to a proposal to improve and expand upon an electrical substation owned and operated by Dominion in the Pentagon City, Crystal City Energy neighborhood that we refer to as the Crystal City substation. So Jennifer Sko from CPHD is here tonight, and she is going to kick us off with an overview of that expansion proposal. And then I'm going to go into a little bit of a deep dive on 2232 requirements and how this relates to the GLUP. And then I'll talk about the proposed amendments. So I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so I'm going to be providing just a quick overview of all the different components of this project, just to help set some context before diving into discussion about the general land use plan amendment. So the Crystal City substation, it's rather dated. The equipment is nearing the end of its useful life. The station needs physical improvements for safety and reliability of service. And on top of that, new development that's going to be coming to the area is going to require larger equipment, something that the existing facility just cannot accommodate. So after doing a site feasibility analysis to accommodate the expansion, Dominion looked, I guess, to the north and south, east. They looked up and down, and they determined that there's no logical place to put their new equipment on their own parcel, but there is space on the adjacent county-owned site, which is the triangular-shaped property to the left. Next slide. So they approached the county in summer 2019 to acquire our parcel. In exchange, Dominion offered to convey one of their sites down the road at the corner of 18th Street and South 5th Street. Advance the slide. And we began moving forward early this year towards an exchange, including due diligence work like environmental assessments and title work. This is the Dominion site. It was a former substation. It is smaller in size than the county exchange parcel, but it presents a wider range of improvement options given the odd triangular shape of our current site that limits development potential. The site was also flagged for acquisition in our public spaces master plan as an expansion opportunity for the Virginia Highlands Park to the north. So to make this swap happen, there's several real estate and land use actions that need to take place. An exchange agreement outlining the real estate action, obviously, and Dominion's planning to use the 18th Street site for construction staging. So there's going to be a license agreement for that. During title work, we found a legacy sanitary sewer easement that was never removed during the original construction of the substation. So as part of the package of documents, they're going to file an application to vacate this easement and dedicate a new one where it actually exists as part of the process. As for the land use actions, Dominion has filed a special use permit to basically allow for the expansion onto the county site. And that's currently under review by staff now. One item, which is the subject of your meeting tonight, the GLUP amendment to comply with state law. Matt's going to be talking about that more in a couple minutes. And then another item that the Planning Commission is going to hear is a rezoning request. So the county exchange parcel, as you can see on the map here, it's zoned as CO 2.5. And in that zone, there's minimum lot size requirements that on its own, this site just isn't large enough to meet. But by joining it with the existing substation site, it will meet those requirements. So that's what Dominion's going to do. They're going to join the two lots through a subdivision. And the RA 716 portion of Dominion's existing substation, that's going to be rezoned to CO 2.5 to permit that proposed expansion. So it's going to help harmonize the parcel so it's one zone, and it's going to blend the zoning of that site with the adjacent properties that are also zoned as CO 2.5. But the county parcel, that triangular shaped parcel, that's not the only component because that parcel actually crosses South Hayes Street and it takes up this entire portion of land where the fire station is across that street. So we're going to cut it back to re-subdivide the county parcel. And next slide. And so this is what it's going to look like. The county exchange parcel, it's carved out in purple. There's going to be a street dedication, identifying South Hayes. And then the county site will be consolidated with another county site that kind of crosses and touches the fire station. So it's just sort of more of a cleanup of that site. And then the Dominion site on the next slide, this is what it's going to look like. So it's a consolidation of the existing substation site with that county exchange parcel to the left. And actually a portion of Dominion's property extends south into South Hayes Street. So as part of the deal, they're planning on dedicating in fee simple that section of South Hayes. And what that does is it just allows the county to, access it, make street improvements without obtaining Dominion's approval. So this is the end of my kind of general overview. I'm going to hand it over to Matt, who's going to discuss details about Virginia state law and the proposed GLUP amendment for this project. Myself, as well as Matt Matuzik, we're here. We're available for any general questions that you might have. So thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. So before I talk about the proposed changes to the GLUP public facilities map, I think it would be helpful to review the section of state code that governs public facilities and the comprehensive plan, also known as 2232. That's the state code section reference number. So this is a bit of a deep dive, and please bear with me. And I imagine we'll have a lot of questions on this as well as on the proposal from Dominion. So those who've been on the Planning Commission for a while probably recall some facilities where the Planning Commission made a determination that a new facility was in accord with the comp plan. I believe the last 2232 determination was in April 2019, and that was for the conversion of APS's education center from the administration building to classroom use. Over the years, our approach to 2232 reviews has not always been consistent. And because there's no guidance in state code for how to implement these reviews, each locality kind of takes its own approach. So part of this year's Planning Division work plan is to develop administrative procedures, and that would spell out how staff will process these reviews and bring items to the Planning Commission. So staff plans to present a draft of those procedures to LRPC early next year for their discussion. The relevant language from Section 2232 is shown here on the screen. The second bullet is a little difficult to parse, and I've put some ellipses in here, but if you go and look at it in state code, this one sentence is 126 words long, and it's really the key sentence in the state code provisions. So on the next slide, I will attempt to break this sentence down into digestible chunks so we can work through it. But first, I'll direct your attention to the bolded text, which indicates that this legislation covers not only publicly operated facilities like our schools and our fire stations, but also utility and public service corporation facilities that are regulated by the State Corporation Commission, like Dominion's electrical substations. So this is my attempt to simplify the language of 2232 that I showed on the previous slide. Before a public facility, and that includes the Public Service Corporation facilities, before that facility can be authorized or constructed, the local planning commission must review and approve its general location, character, and extent as being substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan. Now, going back to that 126-word sentence from the previous slide, the very first phrase is, unless a feature, meaning a facility, is already shown on the adopted master plan, here meaning the comprehensive plan. We understand that to mean that if a facility is shown on the comp plan, the Planning Commission does not need to approve the facility. In some localities, this is referred to as a feature shown. There are other scenarios where the Commission would not be required to make a 2232 determination on a facility. These are not germane to the Dominion substation, so I won't dwell on them right now, but they're listed on the slide. All this is to say that there's not a single path for localities to demonstrate compliance with 2232 requirements. In the recent past, staff has recommended that the Planning Commission determine that new facilities are in substantial accord with the comp plan. That's what the Planning Commission did for the Education Center, for Fire Station 8, for the Lubber Run Community Centers, and any number of other facilities in recent years. Often these facilities were not specifically identified or referenced in any comp plan element, and the Commission needed to rely on the land use designation or the maps or text to make its determination. Another option is to comply with 2232 is to amend the comp plan to specifically show a facility. And I want to be clear here, since this is the approach we're proposing for the Dominion substations. If the facility is shown on the comp plan, state code says that the Planning Commission does not need to approve the facility as being in substantial accord. But remember that the Planning Commission is required by state code to review and act on the comprehensive plan and any amendments. So any facility shown in the adopted comp plan would have already been subject to Planning Commission review, public hearings, and action. In February of this year, the county added a public facility map and companion table identifying all county and APS facilities to the general land use plan. That was part of the GLUP reprint back in February. One of the reasons for creating and adopting this map was to ensure that all county and APS facilities are referenced in the comp plan. This provides a baseline for determining whether new facilities or changes are in conformance with the comp plan, and it can be amended by the county board to reflect those proposed changes. That's a lot of detail on 2232, so let's get back to Dominion substations and how they fit into all this. As I mentioned earlier, Dominion substations are subject to 2232 requirements. That means that the proposed expansion and improvements to the Crystal City substation must either be shown on the comp plan or the Planning Commission must determine that its location, character, and extent are in substantial accord with the plan. Currently, none of the comprehensive plan elements show or describe any electric utility facilities within Arlington. Staff believes it would be difficult for the Planning Commission to determine that the proposed expansion is in conformance with the plan, other than to say that the use is compatible with the GLUP's land use designation. Therefore, staff is proposing to amend the GLUP public facility map and table to include the Crystal substation and 10 other existing Dominion substations within Arlington. Adding these substations to the GLUP would make these facilities features shown, satisfying 2232 requirements. The image on the screen is the public facility map with the substations proposed to be added, circled in red. And we also propose to add the substations to the legend under the category Public Service Corporation, and you can see that at the bottom of the map. The public facility table in the GLUP booklet provides general information for each facility on the map, the name, address, use category, and approximate acreage. We're also proposing to add the 11 Dominion substations to the table with the information shown on the screen. And this is all in the memo provided on the website to LRPC. Because the proposed additions to the public facility map and table are amendments to the comp plan, the county board must authorize their advertisement for public hearings. The board will consider this request to advertise at its October meeting. The Planning Commission will hear and consider the GLUP public facility amendments and the rezoning at its November meeting. And following that, the county board will consider all the requested real estate and land use actions that Jennifer reviewed at the beginning of the presentation. And that concludes our presentation.
All right, thank you, Matt and Jennifer, for your presentations. So, we're here tonight to consider the GLUP amendment and the GLUP map amendment. So we have some questions from folks. Start with Commissioner Gearan.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrull, and thank you, staff, for this presentation. I have a bunch of questions, so bear with me. First, I guess, and it's an overarching question, I want to know why something like this doesn't go to PFRC, since we're talking about a building that's, while not a school or a fire station, is prominent in our community and it's meant to be there for a while. So that's the first one. The second is, I guess, two parts. I'm a little concerned about the design. I've walked past that area before. The current design has a plaza that's not well used. And if I'm understanding this right, rather than expanding onto that part of the site, we're proposing to swap county open space that's adjacent to a nursing home that has a lot of trees on it, let them build on that part of the site. And in exchange, we get a dedication of street, which I can see where on paper that makes a lot of sense. We'd love to have that, but it just doesn't seem like a really great deal. That street's already being used as a street, and in exchange, we're losing open space next to a nursing home. And then I guess my last question is, what's the disposition of the Dominion site that's next to the Parkview Apartments? Because that's a site that's not currently being used. Can they not use that site? And that's all I've got for now. Thanks.
This is Matt Matuzak. I can take an initial stab at some of these. I know we have some representatives from Dominion that can maybe answer some of the more technical questions about why the proposed expansion is located where it is. I do know that some of the information that's both on the county's website and the Dominion website speaks to what's currently anticipated with all of these actions for the old substation site. But I do know its proximity to the existing substation is such that relocating and expanding onto that property, I think, would actually cause a lot more challenges for the neighborhood, given how everything is entering the site today. And knowing that that site has already been identified for acquisition in our public spaces master plan, it did make more sense to approach it from that angle. And based on the real estate review that happened with our staff, the value of exchange between that, as well as the right-of-way that we'll be gaining back, which currently is just an easement that we have with Dominion, I think certainly made for a more interesting approach. The open space, I think, is a very challenging element because while Dominion cannot really expand further east, closer towards Fern Street, given all the underground conflicts that exist there, and they could probably speak better to some of the additional technicalities of preventing them from doing that. The remaining open space, I think, is somewhat unique and challenging in terms of its potential. It is certainly landscape, and we recognize that. I think it will be something that the design for the entirety of the space that Dominion is looking at will need to address throughout its entire property. And that's where I think some additional thought needs to be given to what happens in that existing plaza along Fern Street and how best to utilize that into the future. So far, I think we've seen potential ideas on what that could look like. I know Dominion has asked the community to weigh in on that, and maybe they can kind of just highlight where their thinking currently is based on all the feedback they received. I think you might be still muted.
Thanks, Matt. James, do you mind if I follow up for a moment?
I don't mind at all. Go ahead.
Thanks, Matt. So then it sounds like you have in mind, and I know you know this neighborhood better than anyone from the planning perspective, so I'm glad you're here to answer the questions, but you have in mind a process where the neighbors will have a chance to weigh in on the overall final design in some way, shape, or form of this substation that's there on Fern and...
Yeah, so far what's happened is earlier this summer, Dominion has reached out and met with the civic associations. They've also held a public virtual meeting, but the focus of those was really to highlight the design for the expanded facility, which would occupy that triangular piece that the county currently owns, and then start to suggest preferences and ideas from the community about how the existing structure could be cladded, and also how the open space along Front Street could be treated. And I think prior to the November County Board hearing, we're going to see where feedback collected from those engagements and subsequent online surveys will reflect the comments that have been received about what that cladding would look like in relationship to the new structure that will go up, as well as how that relates to the open space along Front Street and how maybe all three can be somehow tied together through a potential public art project.
Okay, I'm glad to hear this because, you know, I feel like I have a responsibility to relate what we hear from this community all the time. They want more open space. They really don't want to lose it. And you know, we just don't want to keep adding to a site that's not really usable in the way it's currently designed. I appreciate that there's a plaza there. I've never seen anyone in it. So I'm glad to hear that we're looking at this comprehensively. Going back to the other site then, so that's being proposed to be added to the park that it's adjacent to. Does that need any sort of remediation given its prior use?
Initial findings from real estate staff suggest that some remediation will be needed. However, the exact extent of that remediation and associated costs are directly tied to the future use that the county, through a separate public process, would identify for that particular parcel. So for an example, if it ends up being a dog park, that comes with a certain remediation level. However, if it's going to be a playground and kids are going to be touching the ground, that may require something more extensive. So I think there are specific levels at which we would need to address that site, but its use will dictate what level of remediation is needed. The costs for addressing something like that are actually being expected to be recouped from the lease agreement that once the county obtains that site, it's going to lease it back to Dominion so that they can conduct their off-site construction for the expansion of the current substation site. So during that 18-month, 2-year window, whatever it might end up being, those funds will actually be used towards that effort.
And it sounds like you didn't say this, but I do want to know, would you have a sense what the timing is on that?
I do know, well, the only timing I think we are currently feel comfortable sharing, because the further out you go, the more difficult it is to project, but late first quarter of next year is when the construction could start at the earliest.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Commissioner Guerin. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, I have a question about the GLUP map and how that's going to operate. Am I correct that the substations will be a symbol on the GLUP map? Is that the idea?
So there's the GLUP public facilities map, which is separate. And let me go back to the slide. This is a separate map that's not what we call the GLUP map that has the land use designations on it. This is a new map that was adopted in February when we did the GLUP reprint, and it currently shows all APS and county facilities. And it has, it's hard to see on the screen right here, but if you zoom in and it's a big, 3 foot by 3 foot map, the dots, the black dots that you see, each one represents a facility, and it has a little designation A1, A2 that relates to this legend that's over here. So you can see, A1 is this fire station over here or whatever. So what we're proposing to do is add Dominion substations to this map, so they would be dots with their own, letter, number designation, and that relates back to both the legend, and it also relates to, you can see the map numbers over here in the table. So if you're looking at the map, you can go back to the table that's in the GLUP booklet and find a little bit more information about what that facility is and its acreage and what additional uses might be there.
Okay, here's what I need to ask then. We have each of these locations has a specific acreage that's listed. Does this mean if the acreage increases, it's still considered part of that same facility for GLUP map purposes? If it's separated by 10 feet, let's say, is it a new one that would have to have a separate dot? Does it have to be contiguous? Can these expand to be 50 acres, let's say, and still be one dot and still be considered in the same location, that it doesn't need any further amendment to the GLUP?
So
to the GLUP public facility table.
Right. So our intent here is that if a facility is expanding, and so for example, the Crystal City substation is expanding, we know that, so we're accounting for its future acreage in this proposal for the GLUP map, which is this is the 1720 South Fern Street one, so that's 1.4 acres. So if there was a proposal in the future, for example, to expand that even further to 2.4 acres, we would have to come back to the Planning Commission and say, is this is a change. It's no longer a feature shown because it's expanding upon that facility. The acreage is larger. Is an additional acreage consistent, or should we amend the map, or should the Planning Commission make a location, character, and extent determination? Now, if it changes from 1.4 acres to 1.5 acres, that might be a different conversation that we have.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's making me a little bit nervous here, is that there's really no definition about what the criteria is to come back for a GLUP change. Even within something that's 1.4 acres, if the shape of changes so that it's 1.4 acres, but it expands by half an acre in one direction and gives up half an acre in the other direction, would that require a GLUP change? I'd like a little more specificity of how this will actually work and when it has to come back for modifications.
And I think I would probably not want to get into too many more hypotheticals here, and recognizing that there is still work to be done on what are our procedures and how will we handle this in the future. But in the absence of those procedures, this is our proposal for this specific use, and it's a use that is on 11 sites across the county.
Okay. Thank you.
Before I go to Commissioner Siegel, I would share in Commissioner Lantelmi's concerns that while I know we're, adding the public facilities is a relatively new item for us, and I think the Planning Commission, is happy to see those additions, and I think we're going in the right direction, kind of more broadly for our county, with public facility planning. So that on balance is good. I think some of the difficulty, though, is I know we're trying to solve a very specific issue in this one case, but we're looking at this more broadly than that and saying, how are we going to do this across the county? So I would encourage staff to really be thinking about this like we do the GLUP more generally, is what do we want to see those stations look like in the long run? Like, what's the vision for how big they'll be? What's the vision for how much land they'll take up? Not just where they are now. And so, because I do share Commissioner Lantelmi's concerns about, even though we have this, how are we going to make these judgment calls in the gray space about what does and doesn't make sense now that we have more tools? So with that, I'll go to Commissioner Siegel, and then after her remarks, Commissioner Steinberger.
Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. I would just align myself with the previous discussion, the point Commissioner Lantelmi raised, and also Commissioner Schroll. But I want to go back to this particular issue on Fern Street and Hayes. It's Fern and Hayes. It's where Fern turns into Hayes or Hayes turns into Fern. And perhaps Matt Matusak can help. Which civic associations were involved in feedback, in providing feedback, and was that only a meeting? Were those only meetings between Dominion and the civic association? Could you just fill me in a little bit on who has actually been consulted?
Sure. I can start, and I did want to recognize Scott Remy from Dominion, who is available to answer some of these questions. My understanding is that Aurora Highlands had a civic association meeting that Dominion attended to present some of this information. And then in mid to late August, I want to say there was a virtual public meeting open to everyone that was then followed by a subsequent online survey left open for about 2 weeks, I believe, where all this feedback was garnered. In addition to kind of occasional updates that either staff or they would provide to some of the inquiries that have come in, because we have been advertising this pretty regularly to some of the key and regular stakeholder representatives from each of the 3 civic associations, not just that one. Scott, did you want to jump in and mention anything else in terms of engagement?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Scott Remy with Dominion Energy. I'm an external affairs manager, and happy to be with you all tonight. And that's correct. We've reached out to the community on a number of occasions throughout the spring and summertime, and this includes some social media advertising as well to drive people to our website to both see the recording and to participate live and give feedback. Our engagement, I think at the last count, was about 100 people had viewed the presentation, and so we've had, and then I think the numbers were the mid 40s in terms of the number of comments that we received back from the community. So Matt's right. We've reached out to the surrounding just Aurora Highlands, the Civic Association, as well as the other surrounding civic associations as well. And I'm happy to address any of the other questions that you had on the technicalities of the project as well, regarding the usability of the eastern side as well, if you guys would like any clarifications.
So Commissioner Schroll, if you don't mind, I've got a few follow-up questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner Siegel.
Yeah, thank you. So I do apologize. I think that sort of passed through my brain, and I meant to get on the comment period and didn't. So that's my fault, and I'm sorry about that, but I'll make up for some lost time. So the Crystal City Civic Association, you'd also had been invited them, or just Aurora Highlands?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
I'm trying.
Can I go to Matt real quick? I'll try to make this fast. This area is not planned. It is basically unplanned. Is that correct?
When you say plan, meaning
Yeah,
part
not
of
part of
a
the
sector
Yeah.
plan, or
It's not part of the Crystal City sector plan, correct?
it is technically just outside the Crystal City sector plan, which begins at Fern Street and is just outside of the phase development site plan in Pentagon City.
Hence, it's not incorrect to say that it's unplanned.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So I also was interested in Commissioner Gearon's thoughts about this. I did hear also, I think I heard, Mr. Ratusek, you mentioned some design discussion about screening and what this might ultimately look like in the community. I mean, we are engaged in this update right now, and other larger issues dealing with what we're trying to get comfortable calling National Landing. I don't know where this falls. I have yet to look at the maps, and I apologize for not being up on this. But I really would appreciate many, many more exhibitions and drawings, renderings, elevations, ideas for landscaping and screening and cladding. That it's just not sufficient. I'm just not prepared when this comes to Planning Commission with just what I've seen here to say up or down. I would not be comfortable with that. I think the community is owed, the larger community, and I gather you have garnered a lot of information. I would like to see many more drawings and renderings. What's the related piece of Virginia Highlands Park? Is that outside of the study area of the update? I have all of those questions, and I just can't. I guess I need to go back. It's up on the project. It is a project on the county's project page, and perhaps if I go there, I'll see that. But what comes to us at Planning Commission, I think, has to be more robust than what you're showing here on this particular site.
Well, part of that is strategic, and I would say by design, in that in order for us to, I think, successfully unpack all the different actions that are involved, and what at a high level may not be as a complicated matter, it really is, given what's involved and the exchange parcels and the design of something new in relationship to something that's already there, that's going to continue to exist there. So we are strategically not identifying and highlighting all the different renderings and site designs, because really the focus for tonight's meeting is to evaluate the potential GLUP change, where we add substations throughout the county to the public facilities map. And do we agree that that is, accurately and appropriately addressing the 2232 review of such facilities? Once we kind of get past that threshold and we agree that at least that aspect of it has been resolved, the Planning Commission will be able to discuss the rezoning, and likely as part of the contextual discussion, have additional information available in terms of what this will look like, what it's trying to solve, what its relationship might be with the older substation site. But again, the Planning Commission will have a fairly limited scope in terms of what action they're taking, which will lead to the county board's meeting that has really, the combination of land use and real estate actions, and really everything in that entire spectrum. So we definitely, I think, hear you loud and clear, and the Planning Commission will have access to that information. But we are being mindful of kind of structuring the discussion such that we're not spending most of tonight looking at the open space design elements, because really the focus needs to be on the GLUP map.
I appreciate that, but as I understand it, when we went through the exercises on what the 2232 was, and we've just begun to do that as of last year or 2 years ago, I forget which, with the relocatables at one of the schools, I think is the first 2232 we considered. And I don't know whether it was in Matt's language, but it's not only extent, location, but it's character. I believe the word character is in the language of the statute of the 2232, and character to me suggests that it's important in considering this under 2232, whatever the other complications are. And I appreciate there are those, and I don't mean to obstruct that timeline or process that you've laid out. It's very logical. But I just then will, on the record, tell you that I'm concerned about the character of the neighborhood, given the land switches and the land swaps, which may work out very well, but I need more exhibits to be convinced of that.
And we'll plan to have those at the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. Commissioner Steinberger. And I just like, before I go to you, Commissioner Steinberger, if anybody wants in the public who wants to speak, please type into the chat box now your name and then and then the item you would like to address that we have this evening. With that, Commissioner Steinberger.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Technology working, how exciting. So the first thing I wanted to say is sort of, and I think it's in line with what Commissioner Schroll, maybe Commissioner Guerin were indicating before, is that I do appreciate that the reason why we're looking at the necessary change here for the 2232 requirement. In terms of any time we're looking to make a global change to affect a specific result, and that applies to the comprehensive plan, and it applies, in many places that are not related to the comprehensive plan. Well, I think it's fine for this instance. I do think that anytime we're making that kind of a global change to address a localized concern or outcome, then there's always going to be unforeseen circumstances or unforeseen outcomes as a result. So I just think we need to be aware of that and cognizant to it. Though I don't have kind of a grave concern in this instance. I do have two more questions, and apologies if I missed the one piece of information. I had to step away for a moment. But what is the approximate size of the easement on South Hayes Street that would be converted to fee simple?
Scott or Matt Weinstein from the Dominion side, would you guys have that information readily available?
Yes, I'm pulling it up right now. Dominion Energy would be dedicating approximately 19,230 square feet of South Hayes right of way to the county.
Sorry, 19,000?
19,230.
Okay, and then and that's the total. Okay, because somewhere in the written materials it seemed to say 10,000.
Yeah, this is Matt Weinstein. Sarah, 10,000 is the size of the parcel that Dominion would be trading. It's located 18th and South Ives. So all told, the South Hayes dedication and the South Ives parcel totals about 29,000 square feet.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was trying to get a total number and I wasn't seeing it anywhere. Okay, so that addresses my one kind of consideration for that. My other question, and this is sort of a more general or maybe for my own edification, when in the table, for the proposed public facilities table amendments, the listing of the different substations, there's an item that identifies that public facility is leased within a privately owned building, then the acreage would not be applicable. Could someone give me an example of that circumstance? I couldn't come up with one.
You're referring to the existing text in the table?
Yeah, is there an example?
I don't have it in front of me. Can you read it again?
It says for public facilities, it's under notes, for public facilities leased within a privately owned building, the acreage is listed as not applicable.
So that's like the Arlington Economic Development offices are in leased office space. So and the county doesn't own that building. We just lease space in it. So we didn't put the acreage associated with that building in the table.
Okay, thank you. I was just looking for some sort of an example because I was not coming up with one. Okay. Those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger. Commissioner Latellamy, you have your hand raised. Do you have any other questions?
No, but you're going to have to drop it because my hand sign on my bar has gone away again.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Well, thanks.
Thank you to staff. Commissioner Bagley, do you have any questions on? Okay. All right. So kind of just summarize before we go to see if there's any public comment. It seems like there are some concerns from the Planning Commission about the specificity of what we're hearing tonight, that the proposal, while it may meet the specific intent for the Dominion proposal for the land swap, it may not provide the clarity that we need in the long run to address future issues. And there's also been some concern expressed by some folks this evening that even with this specific proposal that's before us, that we don't have enough information to really assess in the moment whether this would really be in keeping with the 2232 guidance, which does include, as Commissioner Siegel mentioned, the character of that proposal. So I don't think we are in a position this evening to say that there is support for this. Certainly some concern, and I guess we look forward to having more information from staff at our November meeting. If there's nothing else from my colleagues, I would like to see if there's any public comment. I didn't see any in the chat feature, but again, I would encourage folks, if they would like to make a public comment, to please kind of type that into the chat feature, just your name and then which item you would like to speak to, whether it was the green building policy or the one we're discussing right now, which is the GLUP amendments. All right. Okay, Scott Remy from Dominion. Would you like to go ahead?
Thanks, James. I just want to reiterate for the public comment portion for our substation, would like to invite everybody to visit our project website at dominionenergy.com/crystal. All those renderings that you're looking for are there. Our pre-recorded meeting is on the website as well. And we walk through all of the possibilities for that site. Anybody can contact us at any time. There is a contact website or email address there to please contact us. We are more than happy to give have additional conversations and talk through the finer points of the project. But I'm always happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Scott, for being here tonight to answer some of the questions that popped up and for giving us the additional website where we can get project information. Anybody else that would like to speak this evening? Okay, well, thank you again to staff for both presentations. Appreciate the planning commissioners for their input on both items, and the members of the public who joined us this evening as well. Have a good rest of the week. Stay safe, and hope to see folks soon.
Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night, everybody.
Hey, Tim.